And the Oscar goes to...
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Springfield Googleplex, the movie podcast for Simpson fans, brought to you by ThatShelf.com. Every episode, we talk about a movie parodied on The Simpsons. Maybe it was The Simpsons that introduced us to the film, or maybe when we finally saw it, we realized, hey, that's where that Simpson joke came from. Regardless, each week we pick one that one of us hasn't seen or hasn't seen in a while, watch it, and come together to discuss. I'm your host, Adam Scholes, and joining me as always is the Dune-like sandworm puppet to my Conan O'Brien, my co-host, Nate Storing. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. I'm feeling the magic of the movies.
Thank you for letting me be Conan. I'm not sure
I gave you the good one this time.
Yeah, you did. And I'm not sure if I've ever shared this story with you, but when my son was born, one of the doctors that came to see us, because we always had to wear masks, he commented on my big puffy hair, red hair, and basically said, oh, you kind of look like Conan O'Brien.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't think that's a compliment, but he meant it as one.
Yeah.
But I don't know that it is.
Well, yeah, you do have like biggish red hair, so
Yeah,
I felt like that was only appropriate. It would be pretty ironic for me to put myself as Conan in that
fair
situation.
enough. And
I'm much more of a sandworm.
Seeing as this is our Oscar special, I thought I'd have a lovely little beverage.
Oh.
It looks like champagne. It's not. It's actually Canada Dry, but that is the champagne of ginger ales. So
That's right. You could have a Miller High Life.
yeah, so cheers to you.
Cheers to you.
And yeah, so this is our Oscars special. Last year we did this, we tried this, it went well. It was like our number one downloaded episode. So the one episode where we don't do our bit was the most popular. I don't know what that says about our show, but as I said to Nate, this is the one episode of the year where we let ourselves be a little bit more, off the cuff, not follow a rigid structure.
Usually because we also have limited editing time.
Yeah, we want to turn this around
really
quickly.
fast.
Yeah, I'm literally flying to Mexico in 2 days. So, anyway, all that's to say, welcome to the 2025 Oscars special. Da-da! That's where I would put a sound cue if I was taking time to edit this episode, but I'm not going to.
So we'll just do it a cappella.
Yeah, just imagine a nice little da-da! But yeah, well, let's start things off. Nate, what did you do this year? How did you celebrate your watch? Did you have a watch party? What did you do? What was fun?
Yeah, so we have our traditions. So usually we make a big platter of nachos. Mm-hmm. We have like a recipe that we really like to make. And then we do very, very potent margaritas.
Right, yes.
We always kind of underestimate just how potent they are. And it's like the first thing that we've, had a drink of in the night because we have it with dinner. And we're usually a little tipsy by, the second category. Just a bit of a problem because it's a long night.
Wow. I would say in previous years, that was usually necessary.
True. So, we watched it on Hulu, which was problematic at some point, but we'll get there. I don't know if it's like this in Canada, but down here, I have trouble every year figuring out where I can actually watch the Oscars. It's because it's like, even if you look it up the day before, it'll be like, yeah, you can watch it on Hulu and ABC, and you're like, great. And then you go to Hulu and they're like, oh, no, but obviously you need Hulu Plus.
Obviously, yeah.
Obviously. And ABC is then like, I'm like, oh, shit, I don't have the ABC app. Then you download the ABC app and it's a whole thing.
Right.
So it was just a mess.
Well, we don't have Hulu in Canada.
Yeah.
We have Disney Plus, which has Hulu shows.
Right.
But
they own Hulu. I
guess. And Disney Plus has also weirdly been like airing certain ABC stuff live. Like my wife watches Dancing with the Stars. It used to be on ABC, and then it got moved to Disney Plus, and now I think it's on both. I'm not sure, but anyway, she watches it on Disney Plus, and they have like a whole live streaming capability. So I was like, oh, maybe they're going to do the Oscars this year. They weren't. So I just watched it on cable because I pay for cable, and literally this is the one time of the year I use cable.
Previously, I didn't know you paid for cable.
Well, the way
part of your package.
Yeah, the way it works in Canada, because we have a telecom monopoly up here. It's actually
hey, it's a duopoly.
Sorry, yes, correct. Actually, now with TELUS, it's a triopoly. But yeah, the way it works is that it's actually cheaper for me to pay for cable and internet than to pay for the same speed internet without cable. Wow. So, yeah, it's so absurd. So anyway, I used to watch it 2 times a year, which was the Oscars and the Tonys. and then they moved the Tonys to like Paramount Plus, and so now I use it one time a year, and it's to watch the Oscars. And this year, I actually checked in advance because I think last year I assumed they started at 8 o'clock. They started at 7 o'clock, and so I was an hour behind for the first hour.
Yep.
I got to fast forward through the commercials, but this year I actually got to watch straight through live. Didn't watch the red carpet because I do have a toddler who, needs to go to bed. And we may have also scarred him from ever watching television again, but we'll get to that too. But yeah, I basically watched it by myself. My wife and her best friend did stay to watch the opening because all they cared about was Wicked, and they wanted to see Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo do the opening number.
Sure.
And then once that finished, they went and left. So I watched the rest of the show by myself. And I think my wife went to bed at like 9 o'clock. I stayed awake until 11-ish and watched the whole thing. And generally, I don't know about you, Nate, going in this year, I was kind of like not that invested. I kind of didn't really care that much. I was excited that Conan was hosting, but like wasn't really invested in the nominees this year. It was a kind of a weird year for film, I felt.
Yeah.
So yeah, wasn't going in with like the highest of expectations, but I have to say, like, I really enjoyed myself this year.
Yeah.
Probably more so than I have in a while. What about you?
Yeah, no, I mean, so at maybe the beginning of the year, I was not feeling super invested or excited. And then I started listening to some podcasts that do the kind of horse race stuff around the Oscars, which is not what we do. No. It's amazing how deep people go. They like know all the stats. They follow all the precursors, like the deep precursors of like every individual guild in Hollywood and all of that. And I find that stuff interesting, but don't care enough to get into the weeds with it, right? But I will say that really did get me a little more excited this year because I feel like because it was a weird year, it was a little bit more of a horse race than it has
for sure.
been, right?
For sure.
And there were like some categories where you're like, I don't really know. Up until the last minute, it sort of like didn't really feel like it was clear who was going to win.
Right.
I think Honora really pulled ahead at the last minute, but like that was not the case at the beginning of the year. And there were a lot of shenanigans in terms of the campaigns this year, almost back to the sort of like Harvey Weinstein smear campaign sort of stuff. I mean, that part of it, not the like horrifying, abuse
sexual
part
assault elements. Yeah, exactly.
but like all of the stuff with, I mean, Amelia Perez, all of that, but also like the Brutalist and the AI stuff. And there just seemed to be a lot more volleys being shot along the way in that I feel like hasn't been as much the case in the last few years. So all of that kind of made it a little more dramatic for me going in.
Totally.
And then, I was excited about Conan, and overall, I feel like it really delivered, It wasn't like 100% hit rate, but it was pretty great. Very entertaining.
Yeah, my wife this morning sort of like we were catching up and she's like, so what did you think? Like, and I said, it's interesting because like you said, there was no real clear winner in each category. And I wasn't necessarily like rooting for a specific film in each category. Like last year, I was Team Oppenheimer, as you'll recall. I was gunning for my boy to win everything he possibly could because I felt he was due to win his flowers.
Yeah.
And so in those years, it's like you're invested because you want your team to win, as it were.
Right.
And then there's other years where it's like there's such a clear winner.
Yeah.
The one movie that's just going to sweep. So you're sort of like, well, I'm not necessarily invested, but like I kind of don't even care because you just know it's going to clean up. And then it's always nice when maybe it doesn't. Like, I remember the Les Mis year. Everyone was like, Les Mis is just going to clean. And then it ultimately, I think it got like 2 awards or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of fun in that regard because it's like, okay, here's this thing that everybody thinks is going to win. And then it just kept losing. And so that kind of made it fun. But this year, it was just like, I didn't have my team picked, as it were.
Yeah.
There were a couple categories where I thought there was a pretty obvious winner going into it, and then maybe it didn't win, and that was really surprising. I will say, I think this was the first year probably since like the La La Land Moonlight year that I was genuinely surprised at one of the award. Like I actually audibly sort of gasped and said, whoa, like it was not anything that I was expecting. So that was kind of fun. Like I haven't felt that way about the Oscars in a while. So while it was kind of a bummer to not have a film I was rooting for from the get-go, I think it was after Honora's first win where I was sort of like, okay, I'm Team Menorah tonight. I hope it cleans up. That sort of was the starter's pistol for me. As soon as that train started rolling out of the station, I hopped aboard and was like, well, let's see where this takes us. So
yeah, it really felt like a crop of movies that any other year they'd all be the underdog of the year. Mm-hmm. And it's nothing but underdogs.
Yeah.
You know, and they're all just competing against each other. But like in another year, of course, you'd be happy to see Honora beat out like a Les Mis, right? But also, like, you know, The Substance would have been a crazy, you know, upset, or like all of them, really. Even The Brutalist, which is maybe a little bit more traditional in certain ways. You know, just the whole story behind it, and like the fact that it is pretty like indie when you really get into it. Like that would have been a big upset over other things in another year. But this time they're all competing against each other because the studios are, you know, not doing so great.
Yeah, it's funny that like kind of the most mainstream movie of the bunch was, because I guess Dune was in Best Picture, but like weirdly was sort of missing from categories that it probably should have been in.
Yeah.
So it felt like kind of the most mainstream pick was Wicked. And that was certainly the film that my wife and her friends were rooting for, but I sort of was like, no, like it doesn't really stand a chance.
Yeah.
We can talk about that a little bit later. But it was, it's weird. I think you kind of put it perfectly by saying like it was a year of all underdog movies. Like the movies that normally would be the underdog any other year, they were all kind of competing against each other. And so in a weird way, you're right. Like if any of them won, you were sort of like, well, this is kind of cool. Like I'm glad that this won. But I think we need to address the one sort of missing film that I think across the board, everyone I've talked to was like, what the hell happened? Was like,
seriously,
no Challengers. Like, where was Challengers? Like,
I don't get it. I absolutely don't get it. It almost feels like there's some kind of political thing going on there, because it's just like to literally get no nominations for that movie. It's unfathomable. I really don't get it. It's like there are great performances. It's a great script. I even think the cinematography and stuff in that movie is actually also pretty interesting. You know, it's not like The Brutalist, which is quite expressive, but there's some really great moments in that. And the last tennis match in that has some really, really cool stuff in it that busts out of the sort of the style of the movie.
For it to not even get nominated in like the technical categories of like to not get editing, to not get score, like that's weird. And I think it's really weird for none of the performances to be nominated. I mean, I think I can kind of see why Zendaya maybe wasn't, because maybe the vote was being split between her two, like Dune and Challengers or something like that. But, you know, I think the two male leads in that gave outstanding, incredible performances. I think
absolutely.
Mike Feist?
Feist.
I never know how to pronounce his last name, but, you know, I first saw him in Spielberg's West Side Story, and I was like, this guy is a superstar.
Super talented.
Like, I don't know why he's not working more. And then seeing this, I was like sort of solidified that like this guy's gonna go far, and then to be totally overlooked is just, it is bizarre. There was a part of me that's like, well, maybe it's because it came out earlier in the year, and usually like movies that come out that early get sort of overlooked, but like Dune was also kind of overlooked, but still eventually made it into the pack.
It was nominated for a good chunk of stuff.
Yeah, you know? So it's... Yeah, and I mean, Dune also has the two-part thing working against it, but yeah, it's just everyone I talk to, be it like the diehard movie fans or even just like the casual movie fans, anyone who saw Challengers was like, that movie rules. And when the Oscars came out and the fact that it wasn't nominated, that seems to be the resounding like, what the hell happened there? So I don't know.
Well, Adam, should we talk a little bit about the show itself before we kind of get into our movie picks?
Absolutely. Do we want to talk about Conan? Because I mean, that's sort of the big, you know, Simpsons connection in a way.
Yeah.
What did you think?
Oh, I thought he killed it. I would love to see him keep doing this for a while. Yeah. Because I can't remember the last time I felt like the hosts were a slam dunk, to be honest.
Well, I know last year we had our reservations about Jimmy Kimmel, and we came away actually like very pleased and sort of surprised by how well he did, but like we both sort of agreed he's not our guy. Yeah, like he's, you know, whereas for as long as I've known you, you've been a fan of Conan's work.
Yes.
I sort of knew him from his like Simpsons writing days, and then as I've, you know, over the years, like all of us have learned to appreciate his late night work and everything. I was surprised that he had never hosted the Oscars before, but I guess like in a weird way, it's like his brand of humor is very much traditionally not the kind of thing they go for, because he is so sort of like, I don't want to say avant-garde, but like he has a very specific style of humor that maybe doesn't jive with the sort of traditional award show fare that the Oscars sort of tends to go for.
I mean, it's true, although they did have Mr. Family Guy on that one year.
Well, yes, that's true, but
which did not go so well, but like they took a risk in that direction, and they probably would have been better even at that point to go with Conan over him.
You know, they used to get Ellen, and Ellen is in a very different lane from Conan, right?
Yeah.
So, I was very excited when they announced that he was going to do it, and I had I was pretty confident he was going to nail it. I was just sort of like, how Conan-y is it going to get?
I mean, that's the thing, is like, with any of these hosts that it's hard to understand is like, how reined in are they by the way the Oscars works, right? Because it's like, of course, I love Conan, but was he going to be allowed to like bring in his own writers and do it his way, or was it really going to be like, okay, here are the lines, you deliver them.
Here are the Bruce Valanche jokes from the last 20 years.
Right.
You need to deliver them.
Yeah, exactly. And it really does seem like they gave him a lot of leeway. Like it felt like, as you were saying, it felt like a Conan show. And I thought that really worked for me. I mean, it was great to see him get to do like a musical number of his own.
Totally.
Which probably was like a lifelong dream, I feel like.
Definitely.
He's always been big on the musical numbers, and so that was cool getting to see him do I Won't Waste Time.
I won't waste time. I won't waste time. There's 23 awards to give its all time to perfection.
Yeah, what did you think of it? Because, like, I enjoyed it, but that was one of those instances where it sort of felt like, he's like, I want to do a musical number. And they're like, okay, but it can't get, like, too Conan-y. Like, it felt like he was kind of being held back. Like, it could have been, like, yes, I know it had a Dune scene where I'm playing the piano, but, like, I don't know.
It also had backup dancers wearing gold helmets of his hair.
Yes, yeah, but there was just something about it that didn't quite feel fully. I mean, obviously they're not going to bring up the masturbating bear, but like, I don't know. There was just something like he was just being held back. But that,
I don't know. I enjoyed it. I didn't feel that way about it. I thought it worked okay. I feel like the joke that pushed it the furthest was the joke about not using any AI and only using child labor.
Yeah. Fair enough.
That felt very Simpsons to me.
Yes. What? They're people. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And what did you think of the Adam Sandler thing? I thought it was great.
I liked it. It was great. Okay. It was good to see Adam Sandler in there. And so he was doing a parody of himself from SNL, right? The Chalamet thing?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Yeah. Okay. And well, he's a good sport. Nice.
I like latter period Sandler more than early period Sandler. Like,
yeah, although he was doing the like Billy Madison voice.
Yeah, for sure. But I enjoy Academy Award nominee Adam Sandler. Two-time Academy Award nominee, I think.
Is that right? My God.
Was he nominated for Punch Drunk Love? I feel like he was.
I don't know if maybe he was.
Here, I'm gonna pull up his old IMDb page. No, that's lists of film roles for which Adam Sandler was considered is a page,
category,
a page on Wikipedia.
Wikipedia.
Academy Awards. Oh, maybe he's not.
Yeah, I feel like that movie is underappreciated.
No. I could have sworn he was nominated for Uncut Gems, but I guess he's not. Okay, well, I stand corrected.
He was robbed.
Yeah.
Okay, what about the Cinema Streams sketch? Did that tickle your fancy, or was that a little bit too on the nose?
That was one of those things where I'm like, this feels like it's written by the Oscars committee that thinks they're a lot funnier than they are. Like, I appreciate the sentiment. And it was coming in that period near the like midpoint of the show where I'm starting to lose steam, and I'm like, okay, like, I get that you're trying to like amp things up again, but like if we cut this, we could end the show 10 minutes earlier, So, or let someone have a longer speech kind of thing. Like by that point, I'm ready for bits to like go away, but I also understand why the producers are probably like, no, we need to throw in some humor here.
Yeah. I feel like I'd rather just have him come back and riff a little bit and like do a little more monologuing rather than do like a whole sketch. The part where he came in near the end and was like, if you're still enjoying the show, you have something called Stockholm Syndrome.
That was great.
That was a great line.
One of the biggest laughs he got during the night was the Trump Russia, stand up to a Russian oligarch, whatever the line was.
Yeah. I guess people wanted someone to stand up to a strong Russian or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Which
the audience went nuts. And
yeah.
I'm surprised that there wasn't a Truth Social. Well, maybe there was. Again, I didn't really pay much attention today, but Donald
maybe
Trump responding to
truthed
it.
about it.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah. The one thing I do have to point out, of course, is that this season of The Simpsons started with the fake finale of the series, right?
Right.
Which was hosted by Conan O'Brien in a very sort of similar vibe to all of this. I will say, I kind of feel like they maybe should have let him write a little bit more content for that finale. Because, it would have been fun to see Conan kind of do his own thing on that a little bit more. Now, having seen him host the Oscars, I'm like, oh, yeah, that would have been nice.
One of the things that my wife and her friends were sort of upset about was the lack of musical interludes this year. Wow. Or what we were told was going to be a lack of musical interludes because original song was not going to be performed this year, which in a weird way, I didn't mind that because most of the time the songs aren't great.
Songs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's to have to sit through a bunch of not so great original songs is not bad. And the songs that we did get to hear, well, it started off obviously the aforementioned Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, that was great. I really enjoyed
The
that.
Wiz / Wicked medley, which I understand why it's there because it's those two are incredible performers and let them shine, and they don't ironically have an original song, even if there was an original song to perform.
Yeah.
There wasn't one in the film. But it also was kind of why are we doing this? Because it has nothing to do with you're spotlighting one Best Picture nominee, which feels a little weird. But also then two of the songs were not from that movie. So it's just
right. But Somewhere Over the Rainbow is just the magic of the movies. We're going to open
100%.
with the magic of the movies, right?
That I understand.
Which got me, I have to admit, every time that song plays, I'm tearing up a little bit. I love that.
Totally.
The Wiz, we have Quincy Jones, which this is one of the weird things, though, is that they managed to do 2 Quincy Jones songs from The Wiz in this special, which, the music's good, but in a night with very limited time, famously,
yes,
it seems a little strange to do both.
And let's be clear, Quincy Jones did not write either of those songs. He just produced the soundtrack to the movie. It's not, it's because it's based on a Broadway musical that is not written by Quincy Jones.
Right.
So it's just
did he orchestrate it or what?
He orchestrated it. And then I know that they wrote a song for Michael Jackson for the movie, but I don't think it was written by Quincy Jones. He just, okay, hold on. No, I'm looking it up. I'm correcting myself in real time. No, so Home is not written by him. There is a song in the film called Can I Go On that he is the credited writer of, along with the Emerald City sequence and Is This What Feeling Gets?
Which were not performed.
No. So none of the songs were written by Quincy Jones.
So great use of time, in other words.
Yes,
is what
exactly.
you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
So anyway, I thought that the opening really worked for me because at that moment in time, you're not tapping your watch being
totally.
Hey, come on.
And with that being said, again, these are 2 outstanding performers at the top of their game. And I would listen to Cynthia Erivo read the phone book. So I didn't mind it, but it did. There was a part of me of is this supposed to indicate that Wicked's cleaning up for the night? And then obviously it did not. So it was just a little out of place, but not the most out of place.
No.
Because I think we need to talk about what I thought was the worst part of the entire show. And it's going to be weird coming from me. But
I know what you're going to say.
Oh my God, the James Bond tribute. Oh boy. Okay. So obviously this was planned before it was announced that the Broccolis are stepping away from the Bond series and have sold it off to Amazon.
Right.
But knowing that, this whole thing felt so awkward. And even when they were cutting to them in the audience, so yes, they get a Lifetime Achievement Award for taking care of this long-lasting franchise for 60 years. 60 years. An incredible legacy. Incredible legacy that is now going to die because of Jeff Bezos.
It really did feel like a tribute like, okay, Bond is dead. We're just going to honor Bond now.
Someone sent me a tweet that said, really weird of them to start the in memoriam sequence with the James Bond theme.
Exactly. That is exactly how it felt. It was like, okay, well, this series is done forever now.
Yeah. And
there was no sort of acknowledgement. Like,
No.
Like, Conan did a great job. There really should have been like a moment for Conan to make a joke about that a little bit more, because like it really was something that needed to like have some attention called to it, because everyone's thinking it, watching
Everybody's thinking it. They showed the montage, and I thought the montage was like fine, like not incredible, but fine. I think the Top Gear montage they did was better on the Top Gear 50 years of Bond cars, but again, that's fine. But then all of a sudden you have mononym Lisa. Not Lisa Simpson.
I know.
Clear.
Lisa S.
Yeah, no, that's too obvious. L. Simpson. Not Lisa Simpson. Someone just called Lisa comes out and sings Live and Let Die. No, actually, no, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Montage happens.
The dance.
Cut to close up on Margot Qualley.
Yes.
Doing what we think is maybe like supposed to be a reference to the Substance, I guess. Like that's what they were going for.
No, I didn't. That's not how I read it. I read it as it's a reference to the opening credits of Bond movies.
Right, but the choice of starting on the close-up of her face was like a nod to the Substance. It had to have been.
I guess. I mean,
because the Bond
more
girls
as, like,
are always in silhouette. They're faceless entities.
Yeah, I read it more as like Margaret Qualley being a Bond girl type.
Okay, fair enough.
It was more like fantasy casting of some future Bond movie where Margaret Qualley is the Bond girl, you know. But yeah, I mean, it didn't. Yeah. The very fact that we're even trying to interpret their intentions says a lot about why this didn't work.
This is almost as bad as the Cirque du Soleil tribute to the movies, which remains my least favorite thing in the history of the Oscars. But anyway, so then she dances with a bunch of like Timothy Dalton lookalikes, which like, okay, sure, interpretive dance. Then mononym Lisa comes out, does a cover of Live and Let Die, which was fine, but like I posted about this and then multiple people responded and I was like, should I know who this person is? Or am I just old? And therefore this is like, someone...
it's the children who are wrong.
Yeah. But I very much get the vibe that a lot of people were like, who the is Lisa?
So she's in White Lotus. Oh. She's in the newest season of White Lotus.
And she sings.
I don't know anything about her music, but that cool. I found out like today that she is in the latest season of White Lotus, which I don't watch, but I feel like there were a lot of attempts throughout the night to kind of like connect to contemporary culture.
Synergy. Yeah. Okay.
And like all three of these performers definitely felt like that.
And then we got Doja Cat doing a cover of Diamonds Are Forever. That was
atrocious.
Okay, I didn't want to.
No, it was atrocious. She was completely off key.
Yeah, I've seen karaoke better than that. And I'm not, this is not a slam on Doja Cat. She's a talented individual.
I agree. But she was not hitting those notes. No. I mean, it's just a fact.
It was rough. And then, mercifully, I would say, closing it out, Nate, what did you text me? You said, oh, okay, well, they're obviously going to close with Goldfinger.
Yeah.
And I said, no, they're not. They're going to close with Skyfall. And you're like, no, they're not. And then sure enough, close it out with Skyfall. Academy Award winning best song, Skyfall.
Which makes sense. The Academy Award winning part makes sense.
Yeah.
But I am shocked that there was no Goldfinger in, again, a medley of Bond songs. Medley of Bond songs.
Yeah. No, I know.
We got Diamonds Are Forever.
Hey, don't you knock Diamonds. That song rips.
It's not as good as Goldfinger. Oh, Adam.
Well, we'll save it for our Goldfinger episode.
Fair enough.
We get Ray, another mononym Ray, closing out with Skyfall, and I will say I thought she nailed it.
Sure, I agree. She did a good job, but also it's like this is an Adele song. Where's Adele?
Totally. Like, Adele is still a thing, I think. And the only reason I know Ray is that she has a song on the new Bridget Jones's Diary, like the fourth entry in the Bridget Jones's series came out. I actually reviewed it for thatshelf.com, plug for thatshelf.com. And in my review, I mentioned that it's possibly the best one of the series.
Oh, wow.
I straight up ugly cried like 3 times watching this movie.
I've heard it's up there, definitely.
It has no right being as good as it is. Okay. And it's got an incredible incredible soundtrack, including on the soundtrack is a song by this Ray person, and it's a real banger, and I've added it to my playlist. So that's the only reason I know who she was. Otherwise,
respect to Ray.
Yeah, so...
the better of two mononyms.
Yeah, exactly. But otherwise, yeah, in any other year, this Bond sequence would have felt a little self-indulgent and unnecessary in a night that's overly long always.
Sure.
But this year especially, it was an elephant in the room, and I can only imagine what it must have been like in the room.
Yeah.
Because like everybody there would have been tapped into like the news that came out literally like a week or two ago. It's not like even this is like old news that it's been sold off to Amazon. It's like so fresh that it's just like, this feels so misguided. And if I were the producers, I would have maybe like cut it. I don't know.
Even if you don't, like, I get it. It's like they've been planning this for a long time, right? But the least they could do is, again, have Conan comment on it, right? It's like, that's where you still have some nimbleness and flexibility, is to be able to just, like, you know, acknowledge the elephant in the room instead of just proceeding as though everything's normal. But
yeah, totally. Are there any other sort of lowlights for you from the night?
I mean, I'll say I was a little disappointed that David Lynch did not get a little bit more than he did in the in memoriam. He did get a longer clip than most, but it's a pretty big deal that he passed away, and someone who had such an influence on filmmaking in America. I mean, this movie wasn't nominated for anything, but I saw the TV Glow. It's like very influenced by David Lynch. Like, there is a new generation of filmmakers that really took him as an inspiration. And so it's disappointing that he didn't get a little bit more. Again, in a night where we got a massive Bond thing.
Yeah, totally.
You know?
Totally. I will say, as someone who has worked on award show clip packages, montages, and even in memoriam sequences, that must be the worst segment to have to produce, because the stakes are so high. And as I said to a friend who texted me last night, I was like, when they were like, ooh, this is rough, like just the amount of people who passed away. And I was like, yeah, and it's going to be this way for the next 10 years. Like, all of these legends of Hollywood are all at that age where, like, they're just going to, every year we're going to be seeing more and more of these legendary icons pass away. And so every year someone slips through the crack, and people get snarky online, and every year someone isn't given enough in people's opinions. So, like, I don't disagree with you, but also like,
it's an impossible job.
The amount of time that was given to Gene Hackman, like, someone could be like, well, why does Gene Hackman get all of this attention? But it's like, the guy really was like a screen legend, had an incredible, illustrious, very long career. And I thought Morgan Freeman's speech, where he was talking very clearly from the heart about his friend, like, also really elevated that from, it wasn't just like, we're going to rap, poetic about a screen legend. It's like, I'm going to talk about my friend. And I thought that was a really touching moment. So that's sort of the sequence that every year I'm sort of like white knuckling, being like, ooh, is this going to go badly or whatever? And I think they did a really nice job with it.
They did. The choice of music was a little intense, but it was very well done.
Yes.
In general, I thought the idea of taking the orchestra pit and elevating it up above the stage was a super bold choice that I thought totally paid off, and it really particularly showed in that sequence. So that was good.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the presenters? Because there was sort of a, it was an interesting mix of,
That's one way of putting it.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. So, give me your thoughts.
Right before the Oscars happened, the news broke that Harrison Ford would not be presenting because he got the shingles.
I did not know he was intending to present.
Well, yeah,
although it's funny, I cannot for the life of me remember who it was that came out. But when they did, I was like, this feels like something Harrison Ford would normally... would be like appropriate for.
So this is my question to you, Adam, because I think it gets at a bigger thing about the presenters.
Okay.
Who do you think replaced Harrison Ford on Oscar night?
I don't know. No, I don't know. Give me a clue. Like it wouldn't have, because it wasn't one of the acting categories, because that's where they bring back previous people who have won.
I would say there were several moments where I was like, really, them?
Okay.
When some of these people came out. The one that I would guess, if I didn't know the answer, would be Daryl Hannah coming out solo to present something. Where it was like,
I will say one of my favorite moments of the night because she shouts out Ukraine and then she shouts out editors. So and as an editor myself, appreciate the shout out
for sure.
And she's a cool ass lady. So,
but a bit surprising.
But a bit surprising. Yes, Daryl Hannah is not someone I have been thinking about recently necessarily.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Although Kill Bill is celebrating its 20th anniversary this year, so like I think that was sort of the.
Maybe that's the thing.
We also got Quentin, so it's like double Tarantino.
I just felt like overall the presenters didn't feel quite as curated and thoughtful as they have in some past years. Where it was like interesting, weird pairings of people, and not necessarily like the royalty of Hollywood.
Right.
Like
valid.
So anyway, it's actually an obvious answer. It's one of his co-stars in one of his most famous movies.
Oh. Okay, but now I'm trying to remember who else presented that night.
I know. It's weird. It's actually really hard to go online and just find a list of everyone that presented and what they presented. Like, someone should just do that as a public service, please. Starts with an M.
M.
First name M, last name H.
Mark Hamill. Yes, you're right. Yes, totally. I was like,
Mark
why?
Hamill.
That totally made, and I think that was the moment where I was like, it's weird that Mark Hamill was, no disrespect to the man.
Love Mark Hamill, but yes.
The greatest Joker in the history of our lifetime.
Hell yeah.
And a legend in his own right, but maybe not the A-list celebrity to come out of the Star Wars franchise.
Right. Well, and also, it seems like they were trying to tie in things that were happening this year. So Harrison Ford is there partly because of, the many great roles he's played, but also because he has a movie that just came out, Right. Like, that's, I feel like, part of why they would want him there. So anyway, I just feel like overall, there were a lot of choices where I was like, that is truly fascinating. Andrew Garfield and Goldie Hawn, for example.
So that's, it ended up being one of the sweetest moments of the night. And
funniest, too.
Andrew Garfield is not only my birthday twin, we both have the same birthday, not the same year, obviously, but he's also my boyfriend. I love him. But, he's so, just that sweet moment with Goldie Hawn. And Goldie, it's nice to see her again. I don't want to say she's a forgotten star, but, she kind of is. And she had such an incredible run, and then, unfortunately, as the way it works in Hollywood, she got older and then she kind of just disappeared. And now, people just think of her as Kurt Russell's wife. But
but she was a huge deal.
She's incredible. She's the best.
To the point where it's you would cast a movie and you'd be like, we want a Goldie Hawn type.
Yeah, exactly.
Because she defined a particular kind of role. So but it was also just a fascinating pairing.
Yes, it made there was no explanation as to why they were paired together.
They thought it would be interesting. Maybe Andrew Garfield, someone got wind of the Andrew Garfield anecdote and would be like, let's put them together because, wow, what a cool thing. And Goldie Hawn's response was very much like, yeah, cool, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah. I did enjoy it, though.
Yeah.
Amy Poehler, another, my girlfriend, Amy Poehler. I'm dating a lot of people, A-listers in Hollywood, so you're aware.
A lot of open relationships.
Yeah. And my wife is aware of this, so it's all good. She has the same birthday as Amy Poehler, so it's all, again, birthday twins. It's all copacetic. I thought she had one of the best jokes of the night, even if the audience didn't quite get it. About international and adapters. I don't remember.
Oh, yes.
I don't want to, I will butcher it, but it was a great.
Too clever by half, but it was, but that's exactly why it was so good, because it was like a sleeper.
Yeah, and as a consummate professional, she gave it a beat and waited for the audience to get it.
To catch up.
And then the laughter started rolling in. And that's why you get comedians to do this thing, because they can do that. But I think my favorite bit of the night was very surprising to me, but it was Ben Stiller's presentation of production design.
Yes.
And I was like, oh my God, it is so great to see funny Ben Stiller again, because I've been watching Severance, and he's sort of moved into directing and isn't really doing comedy anymore. And even the last couple comedies he did were sort of in that vein of not Zoolander 2. It's not
not really my thing.
Yeah, so it was just nice to see Ben Stiller doing some funny visual humor and nailing it. Again, just a consummate pro. That was fantastic.
But what about the very end?
Well, that's true. There's also the very end, which
there's so many layers to it, right? I mean, of course, as you know, When Harry Met Sally is one of my favorite movies of all time.
Rightfully so.
Seeing Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan together was definitely like very nice for me. And of course, you have the music coming in, all that good stuff. But then, of course, you also have like Billy Crystal's long history with the Oscars, which is referenced.
Conan recognizing that Crystal is the greatest Oscars host of our generation,
yes,
certainly. But my favorite moment was when Billy Crystal delivered the line from the end of When Harry Met Sally, and the audience literally groaned.
It was like, oh,
like, come on. But yeah, I mean, it was.
He knew it though. Like he knew that it was going to be a groaner. Like, 100%. And the way he delivered it was very sheepish.
Yeah, but the last time we saw him was the infamous Anne Hathaway James Franco year, and when he came out, there was this palpable sense from the audience of like, can we please just let him take over? Yes. This has been painful. We hate this. We need a proper host. And then
that year felt like someone was playing a joke on you.
Yes,
like that was such an insane thing that happened. Honestly.
And then I think they did actually bring him back like a year or two
and
later.
It was terrible.
Yeah, and it wasn't, it was not.
I mean, we forget that it was like the humor he was doing was also of a time.
Oh, 100%.
And then he came back and did it, and everyone was like, oh shit, we can't do this anymore.
No. Like let the past be in the past. But yeah, it was
fondly and never rewatch it. That's the best way to do it.
It was great to see them back together.
Yeah,
for the second time this year because they had a Super Bowl ad. But seeing them back together and Conan recognizing Crystal's achievement on the show, and it was a lovely moment to end on. And then the win was a lovely moment to actually go out on for the show. Like it was a lovely sort of message that felt like this is a great way to close tonight.
Yeah.
All in all, like it was kind of one of the best ends to the Oscars in a few years, I would say.
For sure. Well, on that note, maybe we should talk about some of the movies, and maybe we can start with our big winner, Anora, the sweep of the year.
Yeah.
Walked away with 5 awards, right? Adam, are you happy with that win overall? I mean, recognizing it's a great film and all, there were lots of great films that were nominated this year. So how did you feel overall about Anora's take home for the night?
Yeah, I sort of alluded to it earlier that I think the first win was for Best Original Screenplay. So Sean Baker went up then, and I was just like, oh, this what a nice, charming dude. He just. So Anora was a movie that I sort of saw late in the game. It wasn't until it was out on home video. I'd heard great things, latecomer to it, and when I saw it, I was like, oh, this movie is great. And I was so bummed that I didn't see it in the theater and didn't see it sooner. There were mumblings that it's probably going to do really well tonight.
Yeah.
And we were sort of texting each other and we were saying you really could kind of tell the temperature of the room and what was going to win based on the amount of cheers when they would do the clip packages.
Yeah.
Pretty consistently, whatever got the biggest cheer ended up winning the award. So yeah, when he went up for Best Original Screenplay, I was like, yeah, totally on board with that. When he went up and won Best Editing, I was like, well, this is cool. It's cool to see a director editor. That's kind of rare these days. I don't necessarily always agree that directors should edit their own work, but when they're good at it, and he clearly is. And then it just sort of again, it took off like a bat out of hell, as they say. So,
writer, director, editor, producer.
Yeah, which I don't think has ever happened before.
No, I saw this on social media, but someone was pointing out that Sean Baker won more Oscars in one night than Steven Spielberg has gotten in his entire career.
Which is just nuts. It's so funny. I saw a shot of him holding up the 4 statues, and it just was so reminiscent of the infamous photo of Michael Jackson when Thriller won 8 Grammys in one night, and he literally can't hold them all. Sean Baker is on the verge. Those things are heavy, so I can only imagine carrying 4 of them. Yeah, no, I'm totally happy for them and happy with it. It wasn't as if it was Les Mis winning 4 awards.
Right.
It was, and as they say, they were a truly indie film made for $6 million. I really enjoyed the film. It's one of those instances where I think both in terms of craft and in terms of entertainment, everything was firing. And it was also the one big surprise of the night. Mikey Madison winning Best Actress. I don't think anybody was really expecting that. When it happened, I was like, holy crap, wow.
Yeah.
Did not see that coming.
I mean, pretty ironic, too, that Demi lost out to the, young ingenue for Substance. Yeah. No, it's true. That was the only one I feel where I was truly shocked that was the outcome. But, well-deserved. She's great in that movie, no doubt. So, yeah. Any other wins that you were particularly satisfied to see happen?
Well, it's interesting because, as I said, in our household, the movie that other people were gunning for the most was Wicked.
Sure.
And, because my wife and her friends don't listen to this podcast, I am very happy and open to say that I did not think the movie was that good.
Yeah.
It had good elements. And I think that the two most deserved elements, which were the production design and costumes, ultimately they ended up winning. And I think
100%.
they are 100% deserved. Nathan Crowley, for people who maybe don't know this, legendary production designer and designed all of my favorite Christopher Nolan movies. Starting with, not starting with The Prestige, but The Prestige was the first time he was nominated for his work with Chris Nolan. I think his first Chris Nolan movie was Insomnia, which is, I think, an underrated Chris Nolan movie. But
pretty good, yeah.
It's maybe the least Nolan-y Nolan movie. And then Paul Tazewell is sort of like a Broadway legend, and then sort of transitioned into working on these Broadway film adaptations. And again, has a historic win, being the first black man to win an Academy Award for costume design, which is really cool. So yeah, like, despite my reservations with that film, like, coming out of it, the two things that blew me away were the production design, the costumes, and admittedly the two leads performances from Arrivo and Grande. But I knew they were not going to win, and I was trying to explain this to my wife and her friends. The part one, part two thing for Wicked really shot itself in the foot. The way the voting block works is they're like, well, we'll have another opportunity to give it to them next time, and hopefully everybody gets nominated. You look at Dune 2, it may not happen. But that's the risk you run. And as someone who does not think that movie needed to be two films and actively is doing a disservice to the
second act, which is famously weaker than the first act.
Yeah, exactly. So
and also, like, Ariana Grande, like, the big song for her character is in the first act, right? Like,
they have a duet in the second act, but like the second act is very much like it's going to be Cynthia's show. That's I guess what I'm saying is, like, when you think of her character, right, of Glinda, like, it's the first act that you're thinking of, probably, the
right?
The whole issue is that, like, now that you've split it up, you're not going to get that proper character development, and it's all, who knows? I will be very happy if they prove me wrong, but I don't think it's going to work. I don't think there's ever been a film that I have seen where they've taken the subject matter and split it across two movies, and I've been like, yep, that was the right call. I think it always ends up doing a disservice to the film, and yes, you may make fans happier because you can put more stuff from the original source material, but it's an adaptation. The whole point is that you're making changes. Like, if I wanted the book, I'd read the book. If I wanted the stage show, I'd see the stage show. I want the movie.
And in this case, they probably are going to be making changes, but the changes are going to be adding more crap that's not in the stage show to pad it out into a full movie.
Yeah, it's ironically, it's coming from the book, which my understanding is the book is not exactly like the greatest of source material. So like the show kind of distilled it down to like the key essence. But as Conan said, it's like Wicked, a movie that says, all those other characters from The Wizard of Oz? Let's make a movie about them.
Where did they go to college?
Yeah, exactly. So what about you? What were some of the like other satisfying wins for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to talk more about The Brutalist later, but was happy to see it get recognized for, again, probably the two things that were the most standout for it, which is cinematography and score. But probably the other one that I'm not going to talk about later that I thought was just a really cool win was Flow, which, again, I was pretty like late to come to, and I admittedly did not get to see all of the other animation nominees or the international feature nominees. But this was a very cool movie, and more than anything, it just speaks to how things have changed so much in terms of the availability of these types of tools. So Flow is a 3D animated movie. It only cost $3.7 million to make, which is insane in the film industry.
Absolute peanuts.
And made on free software. It was made in Blender, which you can just go and download off the internet and start using.
I've made a donut in Blender.
There you go. And this guy, the filmmaker from Latvia, I believe his first feature was just made by him.
Yeah.
And this is the first time he's ever worked with a team of people, and even then it's a small team. So, like, I thought that was just a very, very cool win. And again, it's a year where the sort of structural weaknesses of Hollywood are on display. And, like, Disney and Pixar and DreamWorks got beat out by a guy working in Blender.
Yeah.
And his small team. So it's like, that's pretty fascinating.
I have not seen the film yet. I hope to get to it, but I don't know if I've mentioned I have a toddler, so I'm late to a lot of this stuff. But I heard incredible things about it. My understanding is like an independent animated film has never won before. Like outside of like Miyazaki movies, which like yes, they're independent, but then like Disney there's different agreements
distributed.
And stuff. Like, this is like the first time a truly independent animated film I think has ever won. And there's definitely been years where it's like really like that pretty pedestrian Disney movie wins. Like, is it just because it's the Disney movie and like you have to assume it's because like Academy voters are like, oh well, Disney or Pixar, it must be good, so I'll just I'll tick that box on my ballot. Whereas this year it seems like maybe people actually watched the movies.
It wasn't like my favorite animated movie I've ever seen, but it just felt very different. It was thought-provoking. It's beautiful. It's very video gamey, which is kind of fascinating too, like as you know, a relatively younger generation that did grow up with video games. You watch it and you're like, oh yeah, this is like Journey.
Right, yeah. Totally.
So like that's kind of also an interesting generational shift that was neat to see on display.
What about snubs? Were there any major snubs for you?
I think we
Mr. Snub?
We talked Snub. I think we've talked about them. You know, I mean, The Substance, obviously. Admittedly, I did not finish watching The Substance because I started feeling ill. Not joking
fair.
or exaggerating. I literally was like, I don't think I can finish this. However, you know, from what I saw, I have a lot of respect for it. The performances seemed great. Filmmaking was very interesting. But that was a big one. And Challengers is the one I just don't even get at all. Yeah. So, yeah.
For me, the it's not a snub in that they got nominated, but I think they should have won. I really was gunning for Coleman Domingo and Sing Sing. Sing Sing is this. It's so funny. Again, very, very late to the game. I only watched it, I think, last week, maybe the week before. And it's the kind of movie that typically I would hate. It feels very awards baity. You know, it's based on a true story and it's about prison reform and through the arts. And it just feels so like kind of, when you hear the description of it, it sounds like really masturbatory.
Yeah, sounds like an Oscar movie.
Yeah, and then you watch it and you're like, oh no, this is incredibly moving, incredibly powerful, and Coleman Domingo literally delivers this incredible performance that when I saw it, I was like, damn, like this guy's gonna win. There's no way he can't win this. And then I watched The Brutalist a couple days later and was sort of like, yeah, Brody's giving a very awardsy performance. In my mind, he's kind of... admittedly, I have not seen The Piano, so like maybe I'm misguided here, but it feels like he's kind of playing in a sandbox he's played in before.
I would say the movies are certainly playing with similar material in certain ways. I think the performances are quite different. Is
fair
my
enough.
memory.
Fair enough. And like I said, I haven't seen the films. I could be very mistaken, but I mean, he even called attention to it in his speech of like, this is not my first rodeo. And that's part of it too. It's like, I would have liked to see it go to someone who maybe hasn't won an award before. Because I think, I could be mistaken, but I feel like everybody else was like, these were first time winners almost across the board.
Yeah.
Which is always cool to see. And to that end too, I didn't realize until this week that Ralph Fiennes has never won an Oscar. He like,
it's crazy.
Screen legend. I just kind of assumed that he had. So like, it would have been
seems like
cool.
An actor that would have, like, because he also just has so much gravitas and all
exactly.
of that,
so like, had he won for Conclave, like I think that both of those performances are better than his performance in Conclave, but like it would have been cool for him to win for Conclave just because he is this legend. But because he is a legend, I'm sure he will be nominated again in the future. And obviously my favorite performance of his is in the Grand Budapest Hotel, the movie that changed my opinion of Wes Anderson and made me actually think, oh, I like this guy. So
a movie I still haven't seen because I kind of fell off of Wes Anderson, but I've heard is very good.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. But yeah.
Okay, I'll give you a shocker here. I actually think Ariana Grande should have won for Best Supporting.
I don't entirely disagree. Well, now, okay, I should preface this by saying I did not see Emilia Perez.
So I have.
Yeah, so I did not see it. So I can't really say like whether or not Zoe Saldana is deserving of her win. But when we were discussing this in our text message, you mentioned that it's category fraud. So
it's 100% category fraud where it's like she's clearly the protagonist of this movie.
Right.
Yes, I get it. Emilia Perez is the title character.
Right.
But Emilia Perez is the sun and Zoe Saldana's character is the earth. right?
Right, okay.
It's like she's revolving around Emilia Perez, but she is the protagonist of the movie.
Right.
She's the one who you're really following, and she has a ton of screen time. But on top of that, I think the big thing is, I do think that movie sucks. And
that's why I've not watched it. I was like, I do not. Yeah. There's not enough time in my life to watch a 2.5 hour musical that everybody I've spoken to has said is dog shit.
Yeah.
So,
politics aside, even I just don't think it's a very good movie. I think it's all over the place. I think the musical numbers kind of just aren't very good. I do think the song that won and Zoe Saldana are the best parts of that movie. Right. That one scene. For El Mal, where Zoe Saldana is allowed to like cook and she's dancing and singing and moving around and acting, like that scene is great. That one scene is great, and the rest of it is kind of eh. And Zoe Saldana is the best part, but certainly by far the best actor or character in it. But I really think that Ariana Grande struck a really tough balance in that role, because it is a stage role. That it is very difficult to translate to screen because it's inherently big and cartoonish. And so finding the sort of humanity in it while still not toning it down so much that you're like losing the thing that's recognizable, it's really, really hard to do. And it's singing and dancing and acting. It's a really complicated performance that I think she pulls off 100%.
Again, I do think part of it is the part 1, part 2 situation. I think, honestly, I'm sure a lot of it is just the snobbery of like, you're a musician, you don't deserve to be up here necessarily. Like, obviously, like, she started on Disney shows and like then moved into music, and it's like Will Smith. Like, Will Smith was first a rapper and then became an actor. She's sort of like the opposite. But I agree with you in the sense that like, I can't say that she was more deserving than Saldana because I haven't seen Saldana's performance, but I do think based on what I have seen and the other performers she was up against, it was one of the best performances of the year, no question. The only other thing I want to talk about is I thought the show looked great. I thought the set design, you sort of already talked about the orchestra being raised up. Award shows can kind of look the same, but I think they do a really nice job of like, incorporating the glitz and glamour. This year they did a lot of incorporating the sort of like Academy A.
Oh, yeah.
I really, really liked that. And like the way they incorporated projections into everything, I thought it was really beautiful. That the graphics packages were a little bit weak compared to other years. And this is really the only reason I want to talk about it, is because I just want to shout out in 2014, we'll put it in the show notes. There's like the YouTube link for what The Mill did for the graphics packages. It's the best graphics any award show has ever had. Like, it was the best thing that year. And especially I love the title cards they did for makeup. I was like trying to remember what year it was. I was going like 2019, 2018, 2017, and like just looking at the makeup category until I found the one that is engraved in my memory, and it is 2014. It's just so cool what they did. Like, I just love the amount of care and detail that they put into all of it. Yeah, it's the best.
It did look great, and that is also one of the geekiest things I think you've ever done on this show.
Well, I need to be on brand, right? So,
well, I only had one more thing that I wanted to say as well, and that is that I think we need a moratorium on a particular type of title.
Yeah, what title is that, Nate?
So the movie I'm Still Here, which is another one that's still on my watch list, won for Best International Feature Film. And I gotta say, no more movies that are allowed to be called anything like that. No more I'm Still Here's. There's already a movie called I'm Still Here, which is that Joaquin Phoenix insane performance art movie. That's called I'm Still Here.
Yep.
Also, not to be confused with the other Bob Dylan biopic, I'm Not There.
Yep.
There's also an I'm Not Here, which I believe is a rom-com starring Sebastian Stan, maybe?
Yeah, and when I did the Cinematrix the other week, I thought that was the name of the Joaquin Phoenix movie. This
is why the moratorium is necessary.
Yeah.
Cinematrix has ruined this for us. We cannot have any more generic names that are just some variation of here, there, I'm not, or am, like, no.
And in the film's defense, it is a foreign language title, so maybe like the original foreign language title made more sense.
Perhaps.
But I'm with you there. Like, no more.
Yeah. For the sake of Cinematrix.
Yeah, exactly. If nothing else.
So, Adam, I did spot a few fun Simpsons memes throughout the night.
Please share them
while I was trawling social media. One of them comes from our good friend who joined us for the Terminator episode recently, Matt Lynch. He posted just still of Homer saying, "It's pronounced Corbet? I've been calling him Corbett. Oh, I've been making an idiot of myself."
Yeah, it's fair. I'm with you, Homer. I had no idea it was Corbet.
Really? You're Canadian.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just assumed.
Wow. Okay. I mean, as a Canadian, whenever I see E.T., I'm always like, well, clearly it's an A. But then, here, that's not always true.
Yes, well,
for a variety of reasons.
He's not a Canadian, so that's why, right?
Well, fair enough. Let's see here. What else?
This next one, you sent it to me, and I laughed out loud when I read it.
Okay, we'll see how good my crusty is. So Dave Itzkoff posted on Twitter. It's the scene where Krusty is going into the audience during one of his shows, and he goes, "Now for my favorite part of the show." What's that say? "Lengthy homages to each nominee. Oh, God, this is always death." An okay Krusty, not
okay.
Great
Yeah,
Krusty.
no, but it's a good meme. I like it. Hey.
How do they do that? That kills my voice.
They're professionals.
Okay. Here's another one from Simply M on Twitter. I think this is from the Poochie episode, maybe? And it's a still of Otto going, "A sandworm musician? What were you guys smoking when you came up with that one?" And then it's a still of Conan O'Brien talking to Bart that says, "We were eating rotisserie chicken."
I love it.
We heard all about the rotisserie chicken, I believe.
We did, yeah.
Yeah, from our good pal Bill Oakley. All right, and then lastly, this is not a Simpsons meme, but it is a joke from a Simpsons writer. Jake Hogan was following along with the Oscars, and he said, "Sure, Sean Baker gets cheers, but I get side-eye whenever I thank the sex worker community." Enjoyed that.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. I like that. A trip down meme lane.
For whatever reason, I do feel like the Oscars always brings out the Simpsons memes.
Yeah. And I also saw someone post, it was Seth Worley, a director and visual effects artist that I love. I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was something along the lines of like, the death of Twitter has really made Oscar night a lot less fun. And it's true. Like, it's just not the same as it used to. For years, I remember live tweeting my watch and watching reactions from other people. And in some ways it was nice in that like I was actually just focused on the show. And it's good that the show has gotten better so that like my attention was being held.
Yes.
But in years when the show was at its weakest, you really did need the sort of Twitter sidebar to like keep you going through the rest of the night.
Yes, for sure. We were all in it together.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Adam, why don't we talk a little bit about just the year in films for us? Where, we talked about the biggest night in Hollywood, as they call it. But as I said, we don't really track Oscar season in the way that, contemporary movie podcasts do. But we do watch movies. And so this is like one of our rare opportunities to talk about the movies that we actually watched over the past year and what we thought about the movie year in general. So why don't you start us off? What was your experience of going to the movies this year? And what did you think about the overall offerings?
I mean, I think we've kind of alluded to this. It was a weird year. It wasn't an outstanding year. It wasn't a 2007 or a 1999 or like, it's funny, I was going back through my Letterboxd list when we were doing, again, for that shelf, they sort of asked us to do sort of like decade in review or decade so far in review. And so it had me going back and looking at previous years. And there were a couple years, I can't remember exactly what years, but there were a couple years where it was just like, holy crap, it was like banger after banger after banger. And I wouldn't say that this year was that way. And I was also sort of like, it was a weird summer. We didn't really have any like tentpole blockbusters to the same extent as other summers. I was like, well, maybe that means
Marvel's
we'll have like
missing more than hitting.
Yeah, and I thought, oh, well, maybe that means like the fall will be really strong. And there were some good things. And like I said, ironically, perhaps some of the best films of 2024 I didn't end up seeing until 2025 because I was just so late to the game. Again, I have a toddler. I can't get to the movies as often as I have in the past, so I have to wait until home video, and then even then it's like between the stuff I have to watch for our show, it's really hard for me to keep up as much as I would want to. So I will say I feel like it was a great year for genre movies, especially horror movies. Maybe it's because like horror has always sort of been like anybody can get a horror movie produced because they tend to be really cheaply made, good return on investment, so investors are willing to like front the bill. It was crazy that there were two movies that essentially had the same premise. So there was The First Omen and Immaculate, which were both these like movies about Catholic horror.
Nun horrors.
And had like literally very, very similar beats and set pieces. Like Long Legs was one of my favorite movies I saw this year. Like it was just such an interesting, but yeah, it just, I don't know. It felt like it was a bit of a weird year, and I'm hopeful that this year will be a sort of a turnaround. Although I've only seen one movie in theaters so far, and that was the new Captain America movie.
I also saw that,
but I didn't hate it. I have to say, I didn't hate it. So
it was okay. It was okay.
Yeah, maybe my standard, because I don't really care for the Marvel movies, so like my standard is already so low that like it just kind of exceeded
Met your expectations,
my already very low expectations. But hey, Harrison Ford's on the big screen. I'm not complaining.
Yeah.
What about you?
I feel like I've heard a lot of people be like, yeah, it was a crappy year for film, and I don't really feel that way about it. Like, again, the studios are clearly hurting, and the system is still recovering from COVID and strikes. And so, you know, you're not seeing the sort of like big tentpole stuff that you're used to seeing. Even if people don't like those movies, I do think that's kind of what they're reacting to, is like the landscape feels weakened, right? But on the other hand, the movies that did come out, there's been lots of great movies, you know?
Yeah.
And we've been talking about them, and we're going to talk more about them. And some of them I do think are going to actually have a lasting impact, right? It's not a year where it's like all the movies that came out are forgettable movies.
Yeah.
You know? I think a lot of these...
This is not a year like... Remember that movie, The Artist? That,
exactly. That won Best Picture. That like, what was going on that year?
Other awards? Like,
yeah. This is not that year. Like, Honora 100% deserves to win. I do think that it is going to be a movie we continue to remember and talk about. So, like, to me, it's not as weak as it has been. At least it's not slop, you know?
Yeah, totally.
It's just that so many of the top contenders are pretty small movies.
Well,
that's
and you alluded to it, but like, keep in mind that because of the strikes, you know, the only movies that were allowed to proceed with being made were movies that could get waivers from the guilds.
Yep.
And those tended to be small independent films that were not being produced by major studios.
Right.
So it stands to reason that the movies that came out this year and that were very successful and widely seen, and Last Night bears this out, were all independent movies that likely got waivers and were able to finish being made. Totally. And like, I feel like we'll see this sort of like deluge of, you know, all those other movies that kind of were caught up in all of that. They're all going to start coming out in the next year or two, and we might be oversaturated with that stuff. It's going to take a little while for everything to balance out. And obviously the elephant in the room is streaming. You know, Conan did his streaming bit. If you're not a big tentpole movie, like, they just don't get made. They just get shuffled off to streaming, usually as a misguided, let's make this a 6-episode miniseries instead of a good 90-minute movie. But yeah, like, it's just, the landscape is changing. It will normalize, but we're just sort of in a period of flux.
Yeah. Yep. So we'll see what the next year has in store for us, but I didn't hate it. I had a good time. I actually did get out to the theaters a fair amount and see some of the stuff in theater. Like including The Brutalist, which was like a great movie-going experience for me. So that felt very unique, and so I enjoyed that. So Adam, what I really wanted to do for this segment is to just go through our top 5 movies of this year. Talk a little bit about why we love these movies, and also just compare our lists and see if there's actually any overlap or not. So do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I mean, I will say, to shout out our home network, thatshelf.com, I did contribute my top 10 for the article that they wrote, but that was before I saw a bunch of these. So this is kind of fun because I now get to reevaluate my top rankings. Number 5, I have Dune, but like, I know we're going to talk about Dune, so I'm going to cheat, and I want to shout out Jim Henson Idea Man, which is the one documentary that I have sort of in my top 10. I'm a huge fan of the Muppets, and I thought that was a beautiful documentary about a beautiful individual, and really does a great job of getting to the heart of what made Jim Henson so incredible and what has made the Muppets so incredible, and just makes me wish that they hadn't been sold to Disney and we could get a proper Muppets movie made again. I actually do really like the first Jason Segel Muppets movie. It's got its flaws, and, you know, we've taken the wrong lessons from that movie in terms of Lego sequels and stuff, but yeah, I've been a fan of the Muppets forever. Muppet Christmas Carol is one of the first movies I ever saw in a theater. It's something I watch every year. I adore it. And ironically, Jim Henson was not involved in that one, so it's maybe not a great example, but I've always sort of respected what he did, but I didn't quite realize what an incredible filmmaker Jim Henson was outside of his Muppets work. And this documentary does a really great job of sort of shining a light on his other work, which was really illuminating and made me want to go and seek all of that stuff out because it seems pretty incredible. So
cool. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. I did not know that there was a new documentary about Jim Henson, so good to know. So my number 5, as you kind of alluded to, is Dune Part 2, right?
Yeah, there you go.
When I was putting together this list, I really realized that, I am a sucker for very particular things, right? I have a particular taste.
You sure do.
A lot of it boils down to world building, right? Mm-hmm. And then looking at this list, I also feel like I am a real sucker for ambiguous endings. And I think what both of those elements have in common is that they make things stick in your brain,
Yes.
Where
totally.
you just you can't let it go. And I actually think that those things are maybe some of the same ingredients that make people want to parody things too, right? It's like when something has a particular style or look or feel, or you kind of just can't let go of a moment, right? Like it makes you want to recreate it and relive it and watch it again and all of that. So a lot of these movies have that in common, and Dune Part 2 definitely fits the bill on both counts. Obviously, a very incredibly produced movie, right? It's very beautiful in terms of the effects, in terms of the production design, in terms of the cinematography as well, and really how that all kind of comes together. Has a very evocative score. But, one of the interesting things about it is that, you were talking a little bit about part 1s and part 2s, and in this case, there will be a part 3 to Dune.
Yeah.
But this one has a really ambiguous ending that is more true to the spirit of the book than the original source material, which is kind of interesting. I don't think a lot of people, who haven't read the book realize this, but there is actually a lot of adaptation going on in these movies.
Right.
And particularly sort of beefing up the Shawnee character that's played by Zendaya. Also the Lady Jessica character. They're both more substantial in the movie than they are in the book. But one of the ways that plays out is, this is a spoiler, but in the end, Paul Atreides basically rises to be a dictator and realizes that his destiny is to lead this horrible atrocity and take over the universe. And Shawnee gets the opportunity to kind of demonstrate that she's not on side with that. That doesn't happen in the book, but it makes it an ambiguous ending that really reflects what the author intended. He didn't want Paul Atreides to be a hero. He's supposed to be kind of a villain in the book.
Right.
But he wrote the sequel because people didn't get it.
Right.
So the third movie is really going to drive that home, but the second one actually already does a pretty good job of communicating it. So all that to say, I think it's a real masterpiece in terms of not just the visual stuff, which I think everyone gets, of course, the look and feel and world building, but it's actually a really good piece of adaptation supported by some great acting as well. So
yeah, I'm not a big sci-fi guy. I very much felt Dune 1 was more style over substance. It's funny, I remember rewatching it in preparation to go see Dune 2 and just being like, wow, that is a very long prologue. Because it essentially nothing happens in that first movie.
It's a classic part 1 problem where it really feels like half a movie.
Yeah, and whereas as ambiguous as the ending of part 2 is, it at least feels like a conclusion, and it is a satisfying ending. Definitely liked part 2 more than part 1. Stuff happens. There's more of a narrative. But obviously, the craft that is on display is just impeccable. The vibes of that movie are amazing. And Florence Pugh shows up, and she's one of the best working actors right now. And so, it gets bonus points for that, too. So, yeah, it's so good. And, again, not entirely surprised that the Academy is overlooking it because, A, it's part 2, B, it's genre. There's a lot of things sort of working against it, but hopefully Villeneuve makes another movie before part 3 so that that can be the movie that they finally recognize him for, because I do think he's one of the best working directors we have right now. I mean, and as Canadians, although he's Quebecois, so can we really, as Nate says, can we really claim him? But I've seen pretty much his entire filmography. There's a couple pieces that I haven't, but I just think he's an incredible filmmaker. He's an incredible visualist. He's an incredible storyteller. He kind of is able to thread that needle of style and substance. I can't wait to see what he does next. That being said, I hope he doesn't just keep making Dune movies for the rest of his life. I want to see where he goes next.
Yeah, agreed. So Adam, what's your number 4?
My number 4 is Sing Sing. It's sort of a late addition. Like I said, it's the kind of movie that normally I would be very sniffy about and not interested in and kind of just write off. Part of the reason I didn't was that when I was still working at TIFF, we interviewed the filmmakers and the cast, and it was like a really interesting story because it is based on a true story, and people who I like and respect spoke very highly of it. I didn't conduct the interview, so I didn't see the film in advance, so I only was seeing it now, and I came away from it incredibly moved and thinking that, like, these performances are incredible. What they've done is incredible. You know, for those who are not really, if you're not up to speed with what it is essentially a story about prison reform through theater. So obviously, as a born and bred theater kid, like, I was inclined to like it. Yeah, it kind of speaks to the power of theater to move you emotionally, but also to, in some ways, actually change who you are as a person. And that sounds really like hoity-toity and like, so I recognize that, but that's what I mean. Like, when you hear it described, you're sort of like, it sounds eye-rolling, but they managed to do it in a way where it feels actually very, very honest and truthful and powerful. And I think Coleman Domingo's performance is truly the best of the year. So,
yeah, I mean, I feel like with those types of premises, like, it just means that a lot of it is going to rely on the acting and the filmmaking to help you get over the hump of it being like, oh, yeah, okay, this is one of those stories. You know, the devil's in the details. So it's good to hear that it pulls it off.
And I should note that, like, outside of Coleman Domingo and, like, a couple other actors, basically everybody else is cast from these prison projects. There's basically no stars in this. Like, Coleman Domingo is kind of like the biggest star. And then it's just these incredibly moving performances from these individuals. So I can't speak highly enough about it. So...
yeah, that's another one I need to add to my watch list as well. One of those ones that I think because of the state of the world, I've been hesitant to get into.
100%.
But at the same time, I have heard all that it is also quite uplifting. So I think I'm going to make a point of actually watching it fairly soon.
Totally.
So my number 4 is A Real Pain. Speaking of uppers, I really, really enjoyed this. It's kind of a weird pick for me in some ways because it is a very small movie. It's a straight sort of dramedy, but I saw it in theaters and just really, really enjoyed myself. Part of it, of course, like Kieran Culkin won a Best Actor in a Supporting Role for his work in this, and with good reason. He's fantastic. Jesse Eisenberg is also fantastic in it. And this is, his directing and writing debut as well?
I mean, I think for a film it is, because I know he's written a bunch of plays and stuff. And he's one of those people who I don't normally love his whole deal, but it's one of those brilliant things of, like, despite being the writer and director, he kind of lets the rest of the cast shine. It's not like a vanity project for him, and he uses himself really, really well.
Totally. I think that's the thing about this is, like, because Kieran Culkin's also a guy who has a thing, you know, and this movie just perfectly takes both of their things and butts them up against each other in a way that totally works. I'm pretty sure I heard an interview with Jesse Eisenberg where he said that he did not write this for Kieran Culkin, which is
very
wild.
Hard to believe.
Yeah, exactly. I'm pretty sure he started writing it with thinking that he would be in that role, if I'm remembering this interview correctly.
Interesting.
And then it sort of swapped over time. But in any case, they just fit together perfectly. Both kind of neurotic, but in different ways. Totally. And have a kind of similar energy, but also it's weirdly diametrically opposed. And then, of course, it's all shot in Poland in these really evocative landscapes. It's a movie that is really good about pacing, where scene to scene, the pacing can change very radically, and it's always keeping you on your toes. You're not able to totally predict exactly where it's going to go next. And yeah, I just thought it was really well crafted, and for what it is, which is a small dramedy. So loved that.
Absolutely. My number 3 is Challengers, but at the risk of spoiling your list, why don't we hold off on talking about that for now?
Well, give me your top line.
Yeah, I don't think I loved it as much as everybody else. I definitely, I really enjoyed it, and I admired the craft on display. The score, obviously, the rules, the editing is incredible. Like I said, for me, it was like Mike Feist, whatever his name is. I really should learn it. He kind of stole the show for me, although Zendaya proves to be one of like the best working actors of her generation. It's great to see her break out of that sort of Marvel zone and like remind us that like, no, I actually can play something other than that. There's a lot to love there, and it was so funny. Like, it was kind of at the top of my list for a very, very long time. I felt that I was like, it's weird that it's so high up because like I liked it, but I didn't love it. And I don't think it should be number one. And it stayed at sort of like number one for months because it was just like there was nothing coming out that I was enjoying. Like everything that I saw was sort of just like middle of the road or just bad. So again, I think it was certainly worthy of awards, but for me, I didn't love it like everybody else seemed to. And so I was starting to like have one of those like crises again of like, oh God, do I not like movies anymore? Like, have I been burned from working in this industry and I just hate movies now and like nothing's good and I just want to watch old stuff that I like. But spoiler alert, that eventually that passed. So,
you got at least two that you enjoyed.
Yeah, exactly. So what's your number three then?
Yeah, so my number three is actually another movie that I feel like kind of got snubbed by the Oscars, although I understand why in certain ways. I saw the TV Glow.
Okay, see, I haven't seen this one, so...
Oh, man, Adam, you gotta see it. You gotta see it.
Okay.
I really think it will resonate with you for a variety of reasons.
Okay.
But the number one is just that it is like the most millennial movie that was released this year. And so like the thing that it's really playing on in a lot of ways is, are you afraid of the dark?
Oh, cool.
I mean, it's definitely drawing in a bunch of different things. I think I said this earlier, but like including David Lynch and Twilight Zone and other things like that. But I think more than anything else, it's like I don't know if you know the premise exactly, but essentially the main character makes friends with this other person in high school who introduces him to this TV show called The Pink Opaque. It's this show that they end up having this really, really strong connection to. But then, you know, without ruining it, as the movie goes on, their relationship to the show kind of changes. And they start to question whether it is how they remembered it or... and then, you know, the bounds of reality start to kind of get blurry. And it really is very much a Twilight Zone-like story.
Okay, cool.
That manages to actually sustain the air in the balloon for a full feature length, which, as we've spoken about, is pretty hard to do. So a very, very unusual movie in terms of even just like what it is. Taps into a lot of things that I love from my childhood. Really cool aesthetic, horror adjacent, but also kind of like, I don't know, fun. Like, did you ever play that game? It's a walking simulator where you like... No, you're exploring a house.
Gone Home.
Yes. If you played Gone Home, it's a lot like Gone Home sometimes in the sort of aesthetic and the vibe of it, I would say. But then you're throwing in all of these sort of like classic TV horror things as well. And then the performances are great. Justice Smith, Jack Haven, just killing it. And Justice Smith gives an incredibly... The range that he's giving in that movie is really astonishing.
Cool.
So I'd really recommend that one. It's awesome.
Okay, well, that brings me to my number two, which was Anora, which, as we mentioned, you know, won 5 awards last night. I knew a couple people who saw it, and they said they really liked it, and it just kind of, like, fell off my radar, didn't have time. And then finally, once, you know, the awards are announced, I was like, okay, I got to start catching up on my missing pieces. And, you know, you do the thing you naturally do. You sort of like, okay, which of these do I actively want to watch and which of these can I sort of put off? I will say there were a couple of Best Picture nominees that I didn't end up seeing, and it wasn't for a lack of trying. It was just straight up, they didn't play them here in the suburbs where I live, and they weren't on home video, so there was no way for me to see them in the allotted time.
It's truly like an unbelievable state of affairs, because like even where I live, that's sometimes the case where it's like, oh cool, you're not showing this streaming because it's theoretically in theaters, but it's actually really hard to see. I'd have to drive like, you know, half an hour to an hour in order to like get to a theater that's actually playing it. So like,
yeah. But all this is to say, so I was very late to the Anora game. I sat down to watch it, not really knowing what to expect. Like I was familiar with Sean Baker's previous work, but never actually saw any of his stuff. But, when I worked at TIFF,
Same.
everybody sort of was big fans of his stuff. And I just, I went on this incredibly fun ride, and with these incredibly fascinating characters. They're so endearing. I believe my jokey Letterboxd review really puts the screw in screwball comedy, because there's a lot of sex in this movie. But
there is.
I don't know. I wouldn't call it a feel-good movie necessarily, but it's not the kind of movie that we really normally get. Comedies never win Oscars. Even The Graduate, I wouldn't necessarily consider a comedy, comedy adjacent. It's closer to Anora maybe in its tone, although I think Anora's a little bit funnier. But Annie Hall is a pretty full-on comedy.
Yeah.
And that's basically the one instance of one winning Best Picture. So this is kind of cool too in that sense that while this is still, I would maybe put it in that, I hate the term dramedy, but a dramedy category, it's maybe more comedic than most of those things. It leans heavier into its comedic side.
Yeah.
Again, I think it really threads that needle of incredible craftsmanship on display, but also really entertaining, really well paced, really incredible performances from new and up and coming performers. There's no stars in this movie, or I should say there were no previous stars. I think there's some star making performances in this.
Yes.
Mikey Madison, it's so funny when I looked up, I'm what do I know her from? And she obviously plays that character in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, a film I do not enjoy, but the Manson family member who will not die. And then she's also in the not as bad as Scream 6, but still not very good Scream 5. She's one of the characters in that and plays a kind of similar role to her role in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And I just remember being finding her very grating. And so to see her in this, it's just a completely different performance. And as I said, very happy to see her win, because I think she really just knocked it out of the park. So yeah, late to the game, but glad I got there, and I'm looking forward to revisiting it down the line. And I think it's going to be one of those unlike The Artist, it's going to withstand the test of time, I think.
Yeah, so I guess this is where I lay my cards on the table.
Uh-oh.
While I respect Anora a lot, and I'm also glad that it did win for all the reasons we've been talking about, it didn't really do anything for me.
I will say, though, Nate, and it's funny because, I know what your number two is, so it's this very much, I think our number two films very much emphasize the
respective tastes.
Exactly, and emphasizes the differences between the two of us.
Yes.
Because you saying that, I'm 100% that tracks. This is not a Nate Storing movie.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I'm I feel like I just need to watch it again. And also, I was late to the game, so I didn't get to see it in theaters, and I have seen some of these others in theaters. Mm-hmm. So I also feel like I want to give it a second chance for myself. Clearly, a lot of people love this movie. Was I distracted? Was I not in the right mood? Mm-hmm. Do I just need to kind of let it hit me in a different way? But yeah, it's not in my top 5, and it's not because it's a bad movie. It's just not my thing. So
not your cup of tea, as
my
Spike
cup of
Lee
tea
would say. I have to imagine with its success, we will see a theatrical re-release, and
I sure hope so.
I hope that's the case, and I hope it's a wide theatrical re-release, and that I can go catch it in the theater, and hopefully you can as well, and maybe that will change your opinion. But
from your lips to God's ears.
To that point, what is your number 2 movie, Nate?
Yeah, so my number 2
movie, the most
movie,
Nate Storing movie that has maybe come out in the last decade.
Yeah, truly, this one was very much made for me on a bunch of levels. The Brutalist.
Surprise, surprise.
Yes, which, I will say, it was nominated for many things last night, and I would have been happy to see it win maybe some of these other things, but it did win for the things that I think stood out the most to me, right?
Totally.
Which is obviously Adrian Brody's performance, I think, is very good. I think there is a strong argument for some of the other folks on that list taking it home instead of him. But the cinematography and the music are fantastic in that movie. Just as a starting point on the cinematography, what it reminded me of most is, do you remember the documentary Manufactured Landscapes?
Yes. Jennifer Bashwell.
It was a collaboration, I think, with the photographer Edward Bertinsky.
Yes, and Jennifer Bashwell, yes.
Right. This photographer, for people who aren't familiar, he's famous for photographing natural landscapes that have been affected by human industry, usually, right? So runoff from power plants and mines and all of that kind of stuff. And this movie really utilizes some of those same ideas that Edward Bertinsky's playing with, because his photographs are very beautiful, but they're often also quite disturbing and horrifying because of the massive impact that humans are having on the landscape. And this movie plays with that as a way to also explore the themes that it is working with, because this movie at the end of the day is really about beauty, and it's about the people who have something in them that allows them to make something beautiful, often out of a very hard life, and then the people who have the money that want to own that beauty and control that beauty, and most importantly, the relationship between those people. And the fact that in this world, in our society that we have today, the people who make beautiful things need the people with money, but the people that have the money make it cost a lot for the artists. That's what this movie is all about. And that sort of landscape photography of, the Carrara mines of marble and like these mountains that have been basically sawed in half so we can take the stone out of them, or trains cutting across the landscape, all that stuff reinforces exactly the same ideas and themes in the movie. So that stuff just gets me so excited. As you know, like one of my other favorite movies is Once Upon a Time in America. Another big sprawling epic with an intermission that is all about what America means and all of that kind of stuff. So like this is right up my alley. Just loved it. Recognizing that I think it is a flawed movie. There's a lot of like weird, messy stuff in here. Stuff that I don't really know what it's trying to do. The ending being one of those, coming back to my thesis about what attracts me to some movies, is
totally.
The last postscript to this movie is totally bizarre to me. I can't quite crack what it's trying to do. Again, I'm trying not to spoil too much, but it is either something that is telling you, the audience, exactly what everything meant in the entire movie and giving you almost an interpretation of what you just watched, or seems to be doing that on the surface, but is actually undercutting that. And I can't quite figure out which is which. So to me, like that big question is something that like stuck with me and I find really fascinating. And certainly the choice of credit music, I think, reinforces the fact that maybe you shouldn't take it quite at face value.
Right.
So anyway, it's one of those movies that just got its hooks in me. It's partly the performances, but I think it's really more so the themes and the ideas and the way that the filmmaking backs those up.
Yeah, laying my cards on the table. No, I mean, look, this is why, ebony and ivory,
Yes.
oil and water. I admire the craft on display, but I found the film to be way too long and messy and unfocused. And full disclosure, I watched it at home, not in a theater. And I have to imagine that watching it in the theater, I would have a completely different experience. And I really wanted to see it in a theater. And again, unfortunately, it was playing in 70 millimeter in Toronto, but not at a period where I could get to the theater to go see it in 70 millimeter, which is how
and a lot of those screenings were sold out.
Exactly. So it was just like it wasn't meant to be. I mean, the cinematography is stunning, VistaVision. I love all that stuff. I thought it was really, really interesting too that, and I can't decide if I love it or if I think it's also like so pretentious. Like the opening titles, the end credits, and then like this. So I watched it at home. I bought it on iTunes for like $25 because that was the only way to watch it. Because I was like, well, I'm not going to rent it for $20. I might as well just own it for $25. So it was clearly shot on film. But like, there's lots of movies that are shot on film and then they're scanned digitally and then they clean them up. And they chose not to clean this up. There is tons of dust and hairs and like film artifacts that in a weird way, make it feel like it's all been post-processed and run through a film filter, because that's the kind of stuff that film filters add digitally to make it look like it's film. And it's this weird thing that we're living in right now where it's like, we shoot movies digitally, but we want them to look like film, so we give them this like facade of film. But then when you shoot on film, you want it to look clean and immaculate, so it doesn't look like film. And this is like kind of in the middle, and it's very weird. And I don't know. I found it very distracting. I don't know. It didn't do anything for me, but it's also like, I recognize this is not my cup of tea. I don't like epics. I mean, we did a whole episode on Ben-Hur, and I said like the entire first act of that movie was to get to a point to be like, I'm going to get a revenge story. And I think I enjoyed the first act of this more than I enjoyed the second act. And that seems to be a very common read that I'm sort of noticed online. Like a lot of people really enjoyed the first half and then found the second half. That's where it kind of goes off the rails for them, and they can't really decipher what's going on. I think the performances are obviously very good. I wanted to like it more than I did.
Yeah. I do want to give a shout out to Guy Pearce, because he is doing something very big and hammy in this movie. And I love it. I think it's so good.
The shoutiest performance I have ever seen. And
you know what it reminds me of?
Mr. Burns yelling at his employees.
Well, that for sure, but also Dr. Arliss Lovelace.
Oh, yeah, totally.
He's definitely giving me some Wild Wild West vibes.
Yeah,
but no, I kind of dig it in a weird way, because the character is supposed to be putting on airs, and I think, you know, the way that he's sort of talking and yelling and shouting and trying to use big words and all that sort of stuff kind of fits within that. But I also just think it's fun.
Yeah.
In a movie that doesn't have a lot of fun, he's giving a kind of fun performance, in my opinion.
Well, and I remember as I was watching it, I texted you being like, has Adrian Brody ever like played a contemporary character? Like, to me, I always see him in period pieces, and it's just like he kind of feels like this person out of time. I'm sure he has, and I just haven't seen them, but it's just it's this weird thing.
Darjeeling Limited is, I mean, it's hard to tell when Wes Anderson movies take place exactly.
Yeah.
But.
So it's just like, and I always think of him in that Woody Allen Midnight in Paris, is that what it's called, where he plays Salvador Dali? But
oh my God, yeah. Forgot about that.
He doesn't look or sound like Salvador Dali, but it just keeps going, I am Dali. And it's just like, I just, that which was just ringing in my head as I'm watching this movie. So anyway, again, it's not my kind of thing. I recognize that. I'm cool with that. But again, that's what makes our friendship work.
Yes.
So
it's the Venn diagram, and these are the outer points of the Venn diagram.
Totally.
All right, Adam, what's your number one?
Look, so it played at TIFF, heard about it, saw the trailer. I was like, this is going to be my movie of the year. I went and saw it. I was like, this is my movie of the year. It's a total dad movie. It is Conclave. It's everything I love in a movie. It's beautifully shot, like incredible score. Everybody was raving about the Brulis score, and I do think it's a great score. For me, Conclave is, I thought it was even better. Sidebar, the only other score that I think should have been nominated and maybe even won, because it is doing all of the heavy lifting, is the score for Saturday Night. Did you see that movie? About like the first Saturday Night Live broadcast? That score is propelling that film and making it work, and I feel like it deserves that. But back to Conclave. It's a taut thriller. I think, like many other people, I found the twist ending to be very bizarre and unnecessary and kind of stupid, but like I just didn't. I
also called it the moment that character showed up. I was like,
really?
Oh, well, obviously they're going to get it.
Oh, well, no, I'm not talking about that twist ending.
I know, there's the other twist too, which I don't think anyone could necessarily predict, but both of them I was kind of like,
Yeah. But I just, again, like, I think you've got the Tooch firing on all cylinders. You've got John Lithgow back in his villain era, and it's just some really funny lines. Like, I locked myself in that theater for the Conclave, and I thoroughly enjoyed myself. For me, it's kind of why I go to the movies. Like, I love film, and I love cinema, and I love the craft of cinema, and I study the craft of cinema, and I apply it in my own work. But sometimes you just want to go to a movie to, like, go to a place and be entertained and sort of swept up in a story, and this movie did that for me. I love a good thriller. It's one of those genres that has kind of been migrated to streaming, and as I sort of alluded to before, they don't understand that thrillers are best when they're taut and not like when they're extended into 6-episode miniseries.
Indeed.
maybe it's just because I'm a dad now and I'm predisposed to like this kind of shit. Like, this and spy movies, and I guess now I have to like World War II movies too. Like that's the other
submarine movies.
Exactly. So I did rewatch Tinker Tailor recently. That movie rips. So
Bridge of Spies is coming for you.
Well, yeah, you know, he's got a cold. I know what that's like. He's got to work with a cold. Yeah, I don't know. I think Ralph Fiennes gives a career best performance, but yeah, I loved it. This is where I always struggle with these lists. It's like, okay, well, what are we defining as the best? Is it the best made movie? No. Is it the most entertained or the most fun I had at the movies this year? Yes. And if we're going by that, then that's why it gets my choice. I recognize it is not the best made movie. And it's sort of like, I said this in my review for The Brutalist, like, I feel weird giving this anything less than 4 stars because like it's clearly an incredibly well-made film, but I just didn't enjoy it. So like, how do you reconcile that? So that's where Conclave sort of, for me, I think it's also an incredibly well-made movie, but it was also the most entertained I found myself this year. So.
And this is where our Venn diagrams come back together in the sense that I did not pick Conclave as my number 1 movie, but my rationale for what I did pick is very similar to yours. And I think it's because we're both populists at heart, even though we love the art. What I'll say quickly on Conclave is that, like, I really enjoyed it up until the ending. And then for me, it didn't really stick the landing because it's like, if you're going to have a twisty narrative story like this, like that's very plotty, I feel like the payoff has to be really good. And for me, the payoff didn't totally work. But I agree, like, love the look and feel of this movie. Again, what a great cast. And many of the moments and the sort of little twists and turns that happen throughout in the first, like, 2/3 of the movie I was loving. But for me, it's like, who really won the Conclave felt like a foregone conclusion for me.
Totally.
And then the sort of final twist was kind of a, like, really? That's what's happening?
Yeah. So I totally agree. I totally agree.
But so my number 1 is Challengers. And for me, as you were saying, it's like what it really boiled down to is I just think this movie is really fun. It's just a fun movie. And it's the only movie released this year that I went back and watched a second time. And
interesting. Okay.
So The Brutalist was the top of my list until earlier this year. My mother-in-law was visiting. We were like, you know, hanging out in the evening and trying to decide what to do. And we're like, oh, let's watch a movie. And we were talking about what we could watch and couldn't quite agree on something. And then my wife was like, well, you know, my mom says she would be willing to watch Challengers. And I was like, oh, done. Let's watch Challengers. No question, right? As soon as that was floated, I was like, yeah, I would 100% watch that again. And I enjoyed it as much the second time as I did the first time. But it's the same thing. It's just like, you don't know where that story is going to go moment to moment. And like a good horror movie, there are moments where you're like, oh my God, no, don't do that. What's happening? Like, it's got that sort of viscerality to the storytelling. It's also funny. It's sexy. It's got all these ingredients that are really visceral and exciting. And then it's mostly a sort of dramedy leading up to the finale. And then suddenly the finale blows up into this like amazing piece of filmmaking, the editing, the cinematography. There's that one shot in the finale that just pops in for a hot second where it's from underneath the court and you're seeing the tennis players through a transparent ground with just the lines visible. And it's like, they did a whole setup for that shot.
Yeah, totally.
It's just like, it's just so cool. That's the bottom line for me. It was just fun, and I wanted to go back for more. And as much as I respect The Brutalist and really enjoyed it, thought it was very thought-provoking, I don't know when the next time is that I'm going to watch that movie, because it's a big commitment. It's not necessarily a fun sit, but it is thought-provoking, and one day I will look forward to revisiting it and thinking about it some more. But Challengers, I might rewatch later this year.
Yeah, totally. I completely get where you're coming from. As you said, it's the overlap in our Venn diagram. And like people use the term like popcorn movie as a pejorative, but there's like a reason that those movies exist. And there's nothing wrong with a popcorn movie. And it has more than your average popcorn movie. But it's fun to see people be good at what they do too, right?
Yeah.
Like whether that's acting or tennis or what, it's just it's
playing each other.
It's I remember after I saw it recommending it to like everyone I sort of like would speak to and be like, I think you would really like this movie, like, and trying to explain it, and they're like, it's a sports movie, and I'm like, well, like, kind of, but like not really, and like it's kind of hard to describe, but just watch it. I think you'll really enjoy it.
Yeah, totally.
And yeah, it's a perfect choice for your number one.
Indeed. All right, one final question about movies this year, Adam. If you could pick one movie from this year that you would like to see as a Simpsons parody, what would it be?
Oh, that's tough because we know they don't generally do contemporary references, or at least they didn't in when we were covering the show. They don't really do contemporary stuff, so it's like kind of hard to put myself and be like, okay, so what is the movie this year that is gonna like stand the test of time? I feel like,
or is so indelible that they would,
exactly,
like a Jurassic Park, like they did, the year after or whatever.
I feel like Dune is a possibility because it's genre, or like I could see them riffing on the score, or like the Sandworm or something like that. Challengers, maybe it's just top of mind because of the like the I'll go get the shuttlecock, the badminton scene. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, maybe I would say Dune. I think Dune feels like the easiest option, just because like there's lots there to riff on or to pull out and do a parody of.
It sort of feels like in line with the way they used 2001. Like I could see them using it in that similar way of like, the experience of taking spice becomes something that like they could riff on.
I was gonna say they did the Requiem for a Dream thing with the Rib Witch. So yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It's in that vein. Or the what is it? The Thumper, the thing that calls the Sandworm. I could see something like that being riffed on in The Simpsons for sure. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think Challengers is the thing. I would love to see them do it with like some other sport or something else entirely, but the idea of the love triangle and some of the beats in that movie, like the eating someone else's churro thing, or like the sign he has for you can't see, but I'm putting my my imaginary ball into the crook of the neck of my imaginary tennis racket, which is the sign in that movie that they have had sex. Right. And is used at a very poignant and funny moment in the movie. But like I could see some of that stuff being riffed on really successfully and being a lot of fun. So I would love to see it. Totally. All right, Adam, to finish things off, we have a little game. I'm going to ask you to guess the top 10 most referenced Best Picture winners on The Simpsons in the first 13 seasons. And don't worry, I have some hints for you.
Okay, good.
But I actually bet you can get a lot of these because some of these are movies you love. Some of these are movies that you'll not be surprised about. So, yeah, I think we can give it a shot. So where would you like to start? I bet there's a few right off the top of your head that you could probably get on this list.
Godfather Part 1 is going to be one of them.
Yep.
So where does that land?
So Godfather Part 1 is number 1. It is the most referenced Best Picture winner on The Simpsons.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. I just know from having done this, and it's like Godfather, Wizard of Oz, Star Wars, but Star Wars didn't win Best Picture. Wizard of Oz didn't win Best Picture. Citizen Kane famously didn't win Best Picture. Yep. So it's like, I knew Godfather felt like a safe bet. Okay, I'm just pulling up the list of Best Picture winners because after all, there's been 97 of them. So,
yes.
Gone with the Wind. Does that?
Yes.
Okay.
Gone with the Wind is number 4.
Oh wow, it's pretty high up there.
Yeah. Okay. With 8 references, 3 full parodies.
Okay. I'm gonna go Casablanca.
Nope. Not in the top 10.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay. We're going to jump to the 1960s here. Lawrence of Arabia.
Not in the top 10.
Oh, okay. No, I take it back. The Sound of Music.
Yes. The Sound of Music is number 10 on the list.
Oh, okay.
Yep, so 5 references. There are no full-on parodies in the first 13 seasons. However, our good friend Michael Price did make a full-on parody episode of this called Yokel Chords.
Right.
In season 17, I believe.
I know The Sting has been covered, but I don't think it's going to be in the top 10 because, like, that's probably only shown up. Oh, he's raising his eyebrows. Okay, The Sting.
You can't see,
Now
but
he's
I'm tapping my nose.
Tapping his nose. God, I love this movie.
Yeah. I know you do. It's one of your faves, so I figured you could get that one. So yeah, that has been referenced 5 times with 2 major references. And yeah, it's like maybe the most Adam shit on this list.
What number did it come in at?
At number 9.
Number 9. Okay, yeah. So
Yeah.
that's fair. I'm surprised that Sound of Music is less than The Sting, but
They both have 5 references, but The Sting has more parodies, so I gave it the edge.
Okay, gotcha. Well, if that's the most Adam shit, I'm gonna have to pick the most Nate shit. Rocky.
Nope.
Really?
Nope. They haven't referenced it that much.
I mean,
Even
they
that
did a whole
episode we
episode
did,
on it, but-
the Rocky references
fair
were
enough,
like
fair enough.
fairly slim.
Okay.
Do you want any hints?
Yes. Well, what have we got so far? Oh, we've
Okay,
got number 10, number
we've
9.
We've got number 10, The Sound of Music. We've got number 9, The Sting. We've got number 4, Gone with the Wind. And we've got number 1, The Godfather.
Okay, so let's work our way down. So at number 8, give me a hint.
All right, number 8.
Silence of the Lambs. Sorry, I'm just throwing it out there. Silence of the Lambs. Where's that?
Yes,
land?
Silence of the Lambs is on the list.
Nailed it.
It is not number 8, but it is tied for number 7.
Ooh, okay, interesting.
So let's do the other number 7. So
Okay.
your hint is that the other number 7 is also a cop movie.
Ooh, that won Best Picture.
Yes.
A cop movie that won Best Picture.
I feel like this might also be kind of an Adam movie.
The French Connection?
Yes.
I was
The
going to say,
French
because
Connection.
I just was scrolling through the list and I was like, I'm not seeing many. That is an ad. I love that movie.
I know. Well, you're
Billy
a freaking
Friedkin, he's
boy.
my boy. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that movie.
So,
Wow, 7th. Wow.
yep. So both of those have 6 references and 2 parodies.
Why? I don't even remember what they would have been parodying from the. I am assuming The Chase.
So the French Connection, I know one of the parodies is when the bad guy gets away on the subway.
Oh, and the wave.
looks back,
yes,
and waves.
Yeah,
That's a classic
totally.
one. A lot of the references to the French Connection are title puns,
Right, that
like
makes sense.
the French Confection,
Yes. Okay. Yeah. That
the
tracks.
Springfield Connection.
Yeah, that
and so
tracks
on.
more. Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. Okay. So number 8. Give me a hint for number 8. Is it Forrest Gump?
No, it's not Forrest Gump. Thankfully, they have not parodied that many times. This is a tough one. So your hint, you recently asked me about a famous scene from this movie as a mystery reference on The Simpsons. You were like, there's this thing that keeps happening on The Simpsons, and it's got to be from something. And I was like, oh yeah, it's from this.
Shit. What was that? Can you give me like a decade?
It is from... Do I want to give you a decade?
No, you don't have to give me a decade. Can you
Okay,
give me
let me give you another one. We are about to do an episode about the director of this movie on the podcast, and we've already recorded the episode.
Okay, so it's a Billy Wilder film. So is it the... Oh, it's The Apartment. It's The
Nope.
Apartment. No,
Nope.
no.
Not The Apartment. This is not a movie where you're like, oh yeah, of course, that's a Billy Wilder movie.
Now I know what you're talking about. Because I asked you about the Homer drunk and the signs in the background, but what the hell was the name of the Lost Weekend?
The Lost Weekend. You nailed it. Yes. So this is the thing that they parody a bunch of times in the show. And as soon as I start describing it, I feel like fans of The Simpsons will be like, oh, yes, I've seen that so many times.
Yes.
So whenever someone is feeling dejected on the show, you'll typically get a montage of them walking the streets, often at night, and there'll be signs kind of going by in the background, and they'll be shaking their head.
And sad jazz music.
Sad jazz music. That is a parody of a famous scene in The Lost Weekend from 1945, a Billy Wilder picture.
Okay.
So there you go.
And that's
it's
probably
been
why
referenced 5 times,
Right.
And parodied 3 times.
So that's why it's so high, because they do that bit a lot.
Yes, it is a classic Simpsons bit.
Okay.
Probably I'm undercounting it, honestly, because
Right.
it's one of those ones that I feel like I didn't know what it was from the first time I did my rewatch.
Right, totally. Okay.
Okay, so
Number 6.
let's do 6. On the commentary, one of the Simpsons writers mistakes a parody of the opening credits of this movie for The Agony and the Ecstasy.
That would be Ben-Hur.
Correct. It's Ben-Hur, which of course we just covered on this podcast. Guess what? That was my other hint. And I was like, this is maybe slightly harder. Maybe Adam's memory is going and he won't be able to get
it is, but no, that I do remember. Yes.
Okay. Number 5. Your hint. The most famous Simpsons parody of this movie is verboten.
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Exactly. Yes.
Yes.
That's number 5.
Okay.
So
it's best we don't discuss anymore.
There are 7 references to this movie, including 6 parodies, actually. And so everyone thinks of course, the famous Michael Jackson episode, Stark Raving Dad. But there are actually a fair number of other parodies of this movie on The Simpsons at various other points.
Okay, great. So that means we can cover it.
We can.
Great.
And we can just talk about the controversy obliquely.
I've never seen it, and that's why I want to cover it, because
Me too.
I love Milos Forman, so I do really want to cover it, but figured we couldn't. But if there's other references, then yeah, let's put it on the books.
All right. Number 3. This movie is the most recently released movie on this list.
I'm Hail Marrying it, but I'm going to guess Titanic.
Titanic, very nice.
Oh, yeah.
Very nice. And just for the record, my other hint was one of the best parodies of this movie on The Simpsons features an alternative version directed by Roger Corman.
Totally.
The interesting thing about this one is that there are 9 references to the movie. There's only 2 parodies of this. And it really was just one of those things that after the release, they were like, constantly having the Titanic in the background, lots of like little references to it, but there aren't that many actual parodies of the movie. Right. Just a kind of acknowledgement that the movie existed.
Yes. And it was a colossal hit.
Yes. So all we have left is number 2. I don't think you need any hints because there's one obvious thing that is missing from this list.
Oh.
So let me read it to you.
Okay.
We've got The Sound of Music at number 10. The Sting at number 9. The Lost Weekend at number 8. Tied for 7, The French Connection and The Silence of the Lambs. Number 6, Ben-Hur. Number 5, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Number 4, Gone with the Wind. Number 3, Titanic. And number 1, The Godfather. So what is number 2?
It's Godfather Part 2?
It's Godfather Part 2, yeah.
I was going to say, maybe 2001, but then I was like, no, 2001 didn't win, so...
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, both of these movies are both referenced and parodied many, many times. So, The Godfather Part 2 referenced 12 times and parodied 6 times. And The Godfather referenced 17 times and parodied 8 times.
And I have to imagine all the Godfather Part 2 references are referencing the Vito part of the movie. Because, a
lot of them.
Nothing memorable. I mean, apart from, the Fredo kiss, I guess, really.
Yeah, there's a kiss of death or two. And then there's definitely a lot of, walking down a street. And, the one of the big things they actually parody is just changing the color palette of the episode to make it look old-timey. Right. Which is something that movie does. So that's a trick they use a lot. Also, just the idea that old Springfield looks like the Lower East Side of Manhattan in the 1930s.
Yeah, totally. Of course it does.
Yes.
Well, there you go. Okay, that was not as difficult as I thought it would be.
No, you did well on that.
I mean, I cheated a little bit in that I had the 97 Best Picture winners up, but
that's
again,
fair.
That's a lot of movies to remember.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Very well done.
Thank you, sir. That was fun. I like that. I hope our audience liked that too. And on that note, that brings us to the end of another episode of the Springfield Googleplex, the movie podcast for Simpson fans. If you enjoyed what you heard, please leave us a review and share this episode with the Simpson fans and film buffs in your life. I know every podcast or YouTube channel says that, but it really does make all the difference in the world sharing this stuff and leaving reviews. It really does help. We appreciate if you could take the time to do so. We've also set up a support page on our website where, if you want, you can throw us a couple of bucks to help us cover the costs of making the show. It is a labor of love. We're happy to do it, but it is an expensive labor of love, and every little bit helps. Next time, we're back to our regularly scheduled programming with a pretty deep cut of a movie that actually inspired the plot of a Simpsons episode. It also is the first teaming of Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon. They're the original Odd Couple, but it's not the Odd Couple. It's actually Billy Wilder's The Fortune Cookie, a movie that as far as I know, doesn't exist.
A movie that I also not only learned about from The Simpsons, but not even because of the parody on The Simpsons, but because of the commentary on The Simpsons.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
I literally only know about this because Mike Reese was like, yeah, we stole the plot of this episode from The Fortune Cookie.
So, yeah, it's always fun. We like to always try and find like one or two of these like movies that don't exist to cover on the show. And it's crazy because it's coming from one of the greatest filmmakers of his generation, Billy Wilder, and also is the first team up of Matthau and Lemmon. So I think that's going to be pretty interesting. But until next time, Nate,
We'll see you around the place.
Oscars, 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 Oscars. Da, 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 da. Sit perfectly still. Only I may dance. That was great.
Only I may dance.
Okay, 2.5 hours on the Oscars. Shorter than the broadcast.